Well, one of the official reactions to the horrific stabbing of a Ukrainian refugee on a Charlotte light rail carriage has led to a discussion that I'd like to have. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott. By now, you all know the story of the attack on this woman who was just sitting there minding her own business, Irina Yarutska, who was assassinated by a homeless man who was sitting one row behind her, looked at her for a while, unfolded his pocket knife, jammed it into her neck, got up and got off the train. That story's been covered, and I don't need to or want to get into the many different aspects of this. There's something I want to concentrate on specifically, and that's the reaction of Mayor Lyles, V. Lyles, who said, "We will never arrest our way out of issues such as homelessness and mental health." And I said, "The hell we won't. The hell we won't." What do you do in a case like this? Number of body cam videos I've seen where people are out drunk driving on their seventh offense after being given 2 months of probation. It's got to stop. When mental institutions were essentially closed as a result of, I think it was Geraldo Rivera did an investigative report, and we just said, "Oh my God, institutions are terrible. We got to close them all." The hell we can't arrest our way out of this situation. We absolutely can arrest our way out of this situation. We can arrest and imprison our way out of this situation. The person that murdered this individual had 14 prior arrests. That's not 14 prior crimes. That's 14 prior arrests. And they're out on the street just simply murdering people. And then the liberals who have set up this kind of system of returning these horrifically dangerous predators out into the public, then they wonder why Donald Trump has the temerity to send the National Guard in and restore some sense of order to the murder pits that they've created. So, Steve, let me start with you. There's an awful lot about this video, and many people have seen it, and I'm not going to show it, but many aspects of this that are horrific. But for me, the most horrific aspect of it was the passivity of everybody else on that train.
Everybody on the train.
Yeah. I can understand not advancing on a large man with a drawn knife, but nobody made the slightest effort to help this person. I don't know enough about the severity of the
blood dripping everywhere.
There's just blood everywhere. One person gets out of their seat and moves away. Other person pretends that nothing happens. Nobody put compression on the wound. Nobody did. If I see something like that, I am willing to admit that I'm not necessarily going to go tackle this guy, but I am taking my shirt off and I am putting that into that wound and trying to do something, for God's sake. And this passivity is just more repugnant to me in some ways than the attacker, who's clearly mentally deranged and needs to be locked up forever, and likely will be.
A second video came out. We're recording this on Tuesday afternoon. I saw this midday today, just an hour or so before we started taping. It is another security camera, I guess, of
I saw it too.
The woman after she's been mortally wounded, and not only is nobody coming to her aid, she appears at least to be not quite sure exactly what's just happened.
She's in shock. She's just sitting there.
And she just bleeds out, confused and alone. It's.
Can I just jump in? Can I just jump in?
More disturbing.
I just have to say this with the second you said it. If I'm on that train, I may not be able to stop that woman from bleeding out, but I can damn sure make sure she doesn't bleed out alone.
Exactly.
Okay, that's the point, right? That's the point.
It was. I'm sure everybody who's on the internet has seen some horrible attack videos, and this was another one of them. But that second clip that I saw today was far more disturbing. Or the reasons we just got into, and I won't belabor those. We've got a real problem here. You talked about closing the asylums. This was clearly a mistake. Was reform needed? Sure. But what we have now is, there's a sort of transitory homelessness. Somebody's broke because the bad luck or bad decisions or whatever. A woman and her kids gets left by the husband or boyfriend. There are shelters, and this kind of homelessness tends to be very, very temporary. People get back on their feet. They get the help they need, and they get back to a normal life. But we have a situation that is a combination of mental illness that's no longer being treated. We just stick them out on the streets, exacerbated by drug addiction, particularly fentanyl. And these two conditions feed on one another that develops a kind of sociopathy like we've never seen before, but now we're seeing all over the place. We just saw it again in Charlotte. And what's cropped up is what I call Homeless Incorporated, which is this set of nonprofits that don't exist to actually get people off the streets. They exist to perpetuate their own selves.
That's right.
It's Homeless Inc. And if we took that money that goes to these organizations that don't actually do anything except perpetuate themselves and get these people back out on the streets and back on drugs, if we took that money and put it into a revamped and reformed asylum system, we might be able to actually help these people. But at the very least, Bill, we would get these drug-addicted, mentally ill sociopaths, and I don't think they started out as sociopaths, Bill. They started off as troubled people. But we would at least get them off of the streets and arrest our way out of this problem.
Yeah, Ben Shapiro, I think, saw some comment on this, and he said we get so criticized for being such an over-incarcerated society, and he said, no, we're dramatically under-incarcerated, and I think he's absolutely right about that.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that, but no, he nailed it.
Scott, this entire morphing of the left from being liberals into being leftists is predicated on the idea of critical race theory, and all of these things are tied together. But the giant theory is, instead of having Marxism come to America through the workers, which obviously isn't going to work when you have capitalism producing these kind of riches, we will bring the vanguard of the revolution will be the dispossessed. They'll be the outsiders. We're going to bring it in socially. That's just true. That's just what Saul Alinsky and all the rest of these Frankfurt School writers were talking about. But what that comes down to on the street level is, it means that if you are in a victim class, then you will remain the victim, because that's where the moral high ground is. And when Donald Trump forced the issue by making this national news, the response has been entirely that this poor man who lives such a troubled lives hasn't been given the resources necessary. And so guess what? You stick a knife into somebody's neck after a history of armed robbery, breaking and entering, and now you're the victim. Now you're the one that you're supposed to feel sorry for. GoFundMe campaigns had raised $45,000 for his defense. GoFundMe, to their credit, canceled those accounts. But this idea that somehow we owe more to the criminals than we do to their victims has been around for most of my lifetime, and I just can't think of another word for it two words for it. Number one, it's insane, and number two, it's evil.
Yeah, the resources that man needs is long-term confinement. That's the kind of resource that he needs, and honestly, for his own good. I mean, if you want to look at it that way, if you want to take this sort of position of the people whose hearts are moved by the impoverished, mentally ill, racially discriminated against, or whatever category they happen to be in, it's for his own good that he has long-term confinement so he doesn't stab a woman in the neck in the subway. That's better for him, that he doesn't become a murderer. And the fact that he's been through all of these encounters with the law and is still out there just riding around and does not have a flashing light on his head that says, beware, people don't know. They don't know who he is. And I was thinking about it when you were talking about this. When you live in a city living essentially requires that you distance yourself from people in uncomfortably close proximity. You have to be, you can't process having 1 million people around you and some of them, bumping into you every day. You almost have to mentally distance yourself from people who are right up next to you. And so I think part of what the reaction you see in public transit like that is people who are accustomed to keeping an imaginary wall between themselves and whatever happens around them. They can't be concerned about everything all at once, and so they've decided not to care about anybody. The second thought I had was an old country song by a guy named Rodney Atkins, where he says that he was watching TV and he saw a little town that some big twister tore apart. And the line that gets me every time is he says, people came from miles around just to help their neighbors out. And that's the missing ingredient when you're in a place like that. You don't see those people as your neighbors, whereas some people will travel from one town to another in order to be neighborly to somebody they've never met before, they've never even heard of, but they saw has a need. I don't know how clearly there was nobody in that train who grew up in the country.
Right.
It's like that would have, your instinct, even if it put you in harm's way, would have been to put yourself in between that guy and any further potential for harm, at the very least to help the woman who is bleeding. Somebody's somebody's taking charge of that situation and says, you call 911 right now. You block the door so that guy can't get back in the train, or, you get on your knees and stanch the flow of this blood, or whatever. You've got to be able to take that situation in hand. The most disturbing part of this, other than the senseless loss of this woman's life, is the idea that she could die in plain sight of others and nobody took her hand, nobody stopped the blood, nobody.
Oh, Bill, can I throw
Please,
something in real
of course.
quick that I forgot to mention? This just happened before we started recording. Attorney General Pam Bondi, apparently, I think it's under a terrorism charge. Did you see about this?
Federal
Charges. So no local soft DA. It'll be federal.
So now I'm going to tell you, folks, something that's going to, if you're inclined to think about me in such a way, is going to look like self-aggrandizement, but it's not. It's for educational purposes. I've been the first person on the scene of probably 3 automobile accidents. A woman got hit by a bus. I ran out of the office. I put a blanket over her. I put a tourniquet on her leg. She had a compound fracture of her leg. I've been the first person at the scene of an overturned car where a man's arm was pinned in the car and I was crawling over broken glass while the tires were still spinning. So whoopee for me. But the point that I think bears mentioning is that my brother Steve, who's 1 year younger than me, was on his way to work one morning and saw a car on fire. And he saw that the man was still in the car and was either immobilized by fear or whatever. So my brother Steve got out of his car, grabbed his tire iron, ran over to that car, smashed the window opened the thing and pulled this guy out of the fire. Somebody taught us how to do that, and it was my dad. I have had 3 engine failures in single-engine airplanes. I think by now I have a pretty good idea of how I would react in highly stressful emergency situations. I told you I wouldn't have confronted that guy if he's got a knife, and I wouldn't have. But if I had concealed carry, I would have put something on that woman's neck. I would have said applied pressure. I would have drawn my gun, and I would have said, you stand right there. And if that guy turned to me with a knife, I would have shot him dead on the spot, period. And I wouldn't have had a second hesitations about it. When citizens give up defending their society and depend on law enforcement to do the job, it's game over. The police arrive to put a chalk outline around the body. It's up to us to protect ourselves, and it's up to us to set an example to these predators that you cannot simply murder people at random and expect to just walk off the train without some very serious consequences. This country and around the world has had enough of this. We've had enough of it. We've had enough of this insanity and this lawlessness paraded in front of us as some kind of virtue. And the people who do the right thing are criminalized. Remember the guy on the subway a couple years ago? Was it the Marine who took down that violent guy who was
Daniel Penny, I think.
Yeah, he's the one who's the victim. It's because it gets in the way of the Marxist program of destroying the society. And we need to do some serious thinking about how we educate young men, because that's whose job it is. It's the job of young men to stop these kind of attacks. And funny thing about criminals and other predators, the reason that lions attack the old and the young, the very old, the sick, and the young, is that if a good, healthy antelope kicks a lion in the mouth and knocks his teeth out, that's the end of the lion.
Yeah.
Human predators are the same way too. They always look at the weak and the helpless. And when they are surrounded by people who can defend themselves, they stop preying on people. It's our job. It's not the government's job. It's not the police job. It's not the transit authority's job. It's not the mayor's job. Not that she's showing any interest in doing her job. It's our job to take action. And the last thing I'll say on this, because I'm on a bit of a rant, is that some people will say this kind of thing, this kind of act of courage or initiative is genetic or innate or whatever. And I just say, I remember back, 10, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when that terrorist took over that train in France and had a machine gun and got to the front, and all of the people on that train, all the French people, got out their cell phones to call their loved ones to say goodbye, and the only 3 Americans on that train were the ones that ran up that aisle, took that guy down, and saved everybody on that train. Now, that is not a statistical possibility, right? That's a learned behavior that American citizens learn. And it's about time we started teaching that as a priority, and I think you'll see things like school shootings and the rest of this stuff go down if you start making it clear to these people that regular people are prepared to defend themselves and not just sit idly by and wait till the authorities arrive. To come here to get out of the missile attacks on your city, to come to a place of safety, sit on a train, and finally feel like, my God, I made it out of that death trap. You'd be stabbed in the neck from behind and not even know what happened to you, and then just sit there on the chair and die alone. Not in this country and not on my watch. For Steve Green and Scott Ott, I'm Bill Whittle. We'll see you next time on Right Angle.